Welcome back to Codetega. My name is LeVar, and today we're going to learn how to handle global state in a React application using one of my favorite methods, the useContext hook provided by React. It's simple to set up, less code needed than other methods, and once you understand the concept, it can be a tool that your clients and managers will really appreciate you knowing and implementing. If you haven't already, please click the follow button, as this allows me to create more tutorials for the dev community and help out in the best way I know how. So thanks for watching. Let's get started. In React, we manage state in multiple ways, but the most common is through the useState hook. Yet, one of the issues that we run into with this is that when we navigate between components, that state will be re-rendered each time. For example, let's say I have a counter app, and every time I click the Add 1 button, it adds 1 to the state value. It starts out as 0, but as I add 1, it handles this add 1 function that sets the count to count plus 1. But if we were to navigate away from this page and return, the state would be set back to 0 as its initial state is 0. What if we want to keep that state rendered? So as a user, when I return back to the counter, the state remains consistent. So if I go home and I come back to counter, I want to still see that 6 there as I added all the way up to 6. You could use a library like Redux to manage the global state, or you could call the useState hook that lets you read and subscribe to context from your component. I'm not a fan of Redux, and I think that using less libraries is always a better solution for the architecture of your application. So let me show you how to use useContext and how that works and how it's a great solution for handling and managing global states. First, you'll need to create a folder for handling the context. I'll create a folder called context and add a file named countercontext.jsx. The first thing we need to do is import the hooks from React that we use in order to handle the global state. Create context lets you create a context that components can provide or read. useContext is a React hook that lets you read and subscribe to context from your component. useState is a React hook that lets you add a state variable to your component. And then useEffect is a React hook that lets you synchronize a component with an external system. Now for the counter app, we won't be needing useEffect, but I want to include it to show you a method of retrieving API data and storing it as a global state variable. Next, we need to create our context with the createContext function and assign it a value of countContext. Then we export our default function component as createContextProvider that has a props of children. In our return statement, we will add our createContext as a provider that has a props variable called value, which takes an object of values. Then we use the useContext hook and set the countContext inside the parentheses, making sure we export the context so that we can use it in our application. Now we create a useState hook for counting and set it to a value of 0. In the value argument of our count return statement provider, add the useState variable and set function. Once saved, navigate to your index.js file. We now need to wrap the app with our context provider. You wrap the provider around the base component that you want to pass your props down to. So now anything in your app component and all subcomponents of app can now access the context. This is my app component. Inside of it sits home and counter. Both of these now have access to the context as they are found inside the app component, which is wrapped with our context provider. So go to your component that needs to have access to the context. For this example, it will be the counter component. You want to remove the useState hook, the setter, and the variable, and replace it with the context provider like this. Now in our app, we should see a global state functionality to our counter. It adds 1 when we click, and then when we navigate away and back, it should remain the same. There you have it. You've successfully set up global state. From here, you can manage it this way. One thing to note though is that in your navigation, make sure you are using a React Router DOM and the link component rather than a tag with an href. If anything is refreshing the pages and re-rendering the state, this will set it back to 0. Refreshing the page will also re-render the state across your app. If you need state to remain constant, even on page refreshes, then you should incorporate the local storage.setItem and getItem functions. For best practices, if I need to manage constant global state even on page refreshes, I use a combo of both. For example, I set the count with the local storage item setItem in the component that sets the count, And then in the context, I use a useEffect to get the item. Now when I count using the component and then refresh the page, the count should remain the same. And there you have it. You now can successfully set global state in your React app. I hope this helps. Let me know if there's something that you want help with or a tutorial you would like to see. I appreciate you for watching, and if you haven't already, please click subscribe, as it would really help me out a lot, and I would really appreciate the follow. Good luck, and I hope to see you around. Thanks for watching.